Commander Elena Drake stood at the helm of the diplomatic vessel Concordia, watching the crystalline spires of the Valoran capital city pierce the violet sky. After 15 years of Cold War between humans and the warrior race known as the Valorans, this mission represented humanity's last chance at peace. If she failed, both species would likely destroy each other in the coming war. Approaching landing coordinates, Lieutenant Park announced from the navigation console. Valoran escort fighters maintaining formation. Elena nodded, adjusting her formal diplomatic uniform. The weight of her neural implant at the base of her skull reminded her of everything humanity had achieved, and everything they stood to lose. The Valorans might look down on human technology, preferring their biological enhancements and crystalline weapons, but humanity's adaptability had kept them alive this long. Final approach, Park called out. Detecting unusual energy signatures from the surface. Before Elena could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The deck lurched beneath her feet as emergency containment fields snapped into place. Multiple weapon systems activating on the surface. Park shouted. They're targeting our engines. This was a trap, Elena realized, grabbing the command rail as the ship shuddered. All hands, battle stations. Get us out of here. But it was too late. Crystalline beams lanced up from the surface, cutting through their shields like paper. The last thing Elena saw before darkness took her was the planet's surface rushing up to meet them. She awoke to the taste of blood and smoke. The bridge was in ruins, emergency lighting casting everything in an eerie red glow. Most of her crew lay still at their stations. Elena pulled herself to her feet, checking for survivors. Commander. Park gasped from his ruined console. Behind you. Elena spun, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. A towering figure stood in the shattered doorway, at least 7 feet tall, with iridescent scaled skin and swept-back crystalline horns. A Valoran warrior, his armor adorned with the royal crest. I am Prince Crix, the warrior announced, his voice resonating with harmonic undertones. You have violated our sovereign space. Surrender, and your remaining crew will be treated with honor. Elena's eyes narrowed. We were invited here to negotiate peace. This was an ambush. Peace. Crix's crystalline eyes flashed. Your kind speaks of peace while sending spies and saboteurs to our worlds. We found the weapons hidden in your cargo hold. What weapons? We're a diplomatic vessel. Elena protested, but Crix was already striding forward, energy crackling around his ceremonial blade. Your deception ends here, human, he growled. Though I admit, you show more spine than most of your kind. Elena backed away, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her foot caught on a piece of debris and she stumbled. Crix's blade swept down, but instead of killing her, he used it to pin her against the wall, the energy field crackling inches from her throat. I should execute you where you stand, he rumbled. But our laws demand that spies be properly tried and sentenced. Elena met his gaze defiantly. I am not a spy. Someone wanted this mission to fail, someone who benefits from our species destroying each other. Something flickered in Crix's crystalline eyes, doubt, perhaps. But before he could respond, the deck beneath them groaned. The ship was breaking apart. We need to evacuate, Elena said urgently. Help me save my crew, and I'll submit to your justice willingly. Crix studied her for a long moment, then lowered his blade. Very well. But try to escape, and dash. His warning was cut short as the deck suddenly gave way beneath them. Elena found herself falling alongside the Valoran prince. Acting on instinct, she grabbed his armor, using his greater mass to control their descent. They crashed through several decks before landing hard in what remained of the cargo hold. Elena's vision swam as she tried to rise. Her hand came away from the deck wet with blood, both red and the iridescent blue of Valoran blood. In their fall, one of Crix's crystalline horns had been damaged, dripping vital fluid. To her horror, she realized some of their blood had mixed where their wounds touched. Crick's eyes went wide with shock. "No," he breathed. "The blood binding, do you know what you've done?" Elena's stomach dropped. She'd studied Valoran culture extensively before this mission. Blood mixing between warriors was their most sacred bond, one that could never be broken. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "I'm human, surely it doesn't apply." The old magics care nothing for species, Crix growled, struggling to his feet. "You are bound to me now, as I am to you. And there is only one way to break such a bond. Death," Elena finished grimly. She'd come to negotiate peace, and instead had accidentally created an unbreakable connection with the enemy prince. As the ship continued to break apart around them, she realized this was only the beginning of their problems. This was going to be a very long day. The crystalline halls of the Valoran High Court echoed with whispers as Elena stood before the Council of Elders. Her wrists were bound with energy cuffs, but she held her head high. Beside her, Prince Crix stood rigid, his damaged horn now sealed with a ceremonial cap that did little to hide his shame. "A blood binding with a human," Elder Vsara hissed, her scaled features twisted with disgust. "This is unprecedented. And during an act of espionage, no less." "There was no espionage," Elena insisted. "Our mission was peaceful. Someone planted those weapons." Silence. Another elder slammed his staff against the crystal floor. "The evidence is clear. Human weapons were found in your ship's holds. The only question now is how to proceed, given this unfortunate binding." Crix stepped forward. "Honored elders, our laws are absolute. Once bound, both parties must complete the trial of worth or face execution. I request the right to oversee the humans' trials myself." Elena shot him a sharp look. She'd expected him to demand her immediate execution, binding or no binding. Instead, he was invoking an ancient law that might keep her alive, for now. The elders conferred in hushed tones before Elder Vsara spoke again. "Very well. The human will face 3 trials. Should she fail any of them, both she and Prince Crix will face the consequences. The first trial begins at dawn." As guards led them from the chamber, Elena felt Crix's crystalline gaze on her. "Why did you help me?" she whispered. "Because you were right about one thing," he replied quietly. "Someone wanted your mission to fail. And I intend to find out who." Dawn came too quickly. Elena stood in a massive arena, her diplomatic uniform replaced with light combat armor that felt woefully inadequate. Thousands of Valorans filled the stands, their crystalline eyes glowing with anticipation. "The first trial is combat," Crix explained, checking her armor seals. "You must defeat 3 warriors in succession. These are not fights to the death, but they might kill you anyway." "Your people really know how to make someone feel welcome," Elena muttered. Then she noticed his hands lingering on her armor. "What are you doing?" "The binding. I can feel your anxiety," he admitted. "It creates a connection deeper than mere emotions. If you die, I die. So try not to fail spectacularly." Before Elena could respond, horns blared. Her first opponent stepped into the arena, a female Valoran warrior wielding twin energy blades, her scales shimming with battle enhancement crystals. "Remember," Crix said. "We fight with honor, but we do not fight fair. Use everything you have." The fight was brutal. Elena's human reflexes were enhanced by her neural implant, but the Valoran warrior was literally born for combat. Energy blades crackled through the air as Elena dodged and weaved, looking for an opening. She found it when her opponent's enhancement crystals briefly flared, causing a millisecond of sensory overload. Elena struck hard, using techniques she'd learned from Earth's diverse martial arts. The warrior went down. The crowd's shocked silence quickly turned to murmurs of approval. Even Crix looked impressed. 2 more fights followed, each harder than the last. By the end, Elena was bleeding from a dozen cuts, her armor scorched and cracked. But she stood victorious. The human has passed the first trial, Elder Sara announced, unable to completely hide her surprise. The second trial begins tomorrow, the trial of mind. Later, in her secured quarters, Elena struggled to tend her wounds. The door chimed, and Crix entered carrying medical supplies. "Your technique was unexpected," he said, beginning to clean a nasty cut on her shoulder. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Earth has thousands of combat styles, developed over millennia," Elena winced as he applied a healing crystal. "We adapt. It's what humans do best." "Perhaps," Crix's voice softened slightly. "But there's something else. During the fights, through our bond, I felt your determination. You weren't just fighting to survive. You truly believe your mission was genuine." Elena met his gaze. "Help me prove it. Someone set us both up, someone who has access to both human and Valoran security. The weapons in our hold, the surface defenses activating, none of it adds up." Crix was quiet for a long moment as he finished treating her wounds. "There are factions among my people who oppose peace with humans. They believe your species is too dangerous, too unpredictable. And now that we're bound, we're both targets," Elena finished. "Perfect scapegoats if anyone discovers the truth. The second trial will test your mind, your ability to resist our psychic probes," Crix warned. "If you're hiding anything, they'll find it. And if they find evidence of espionage, then we both die." Elena stood, ignoring the pain. "But if they go deep enough, maybe they'll find proof of who really planted those weapons." Crix's crystalline eyes narrowed. "You would risk a full psychic scan. Few humans survive that level of intrusion." "I'll survive," Elena said firmly. "And then we'll find out who's really behind all this. Unless, you're still not sure which side you're on." The prince touched his damaged horn, then met her gaze. "The binding goes both ways, Elena. I know you speak truth. Tomorrow, we'll prove it, or die trying." As he left, Elena felt the weight of tomorrow's trial settling over her. The combat had been brutal, but at least she understood physical combat. Having alien psychics dig through her mind, that was a whole new level of terrifying. But she had no choice. Somewhere in this crystalline city, someone was working to ensure humans and Valorans would destroy each other. And ironically, only her accidental blood bond with Crix might give them a chance to expose the truth. The psychic chamber was a perfect sphere of living crystal, its faceted surfaces pulsing with bioluminescent light. Elena lay on a crystalline bed at its center, her mind racing despite her attempts to stay calm. Around her, 3 Valoran mind seers prepared for the second trial, their scaled hands moving in precise patterns as they activated the chamber's psychic resonators. Crix stood at the chamber's edge, his presence a steady anchor through their blood bond. "Remember," he said quietly, "don't fight the probe. The more you resist, the more damage it will cause." "Easy for you to say," Elena muttered. "You're not the one about to have aliens rummaging through your memories." The lead mind seer, an ancient Valoran with crystalline growths covering most of his face, stepped forward. "The trial of mind begins. We will know your truth, human." The chamber's crystals flared. Elena felt the first touch of alien consciousness against her thoughts, like ice-cold fingers sliding through her brain. She forced herself to breathe steadily as the psychic probe deepened. Memories flashed through her mind, her childhood on the lunar colonies, watching Earth shine blue and white in the black sky. Training at the diplomatic academy. Her first contact with alien species. The years of rising tensions with the Valorans. "Interesting," the mind seer murmured. "Your species dreams of the stars even as children. Yet you fear what you find there." The probe pushed deeper. Elena gasped as they reached the memory of her mission briefing. Admiral Chen handing her the diplomatic papers. The careful security checks of the Concordia before launch. Everything by the book, everything legitimate. No signs of deception, another mind-seer noted. But we must go deeper. The surface thoughts could be conditioned. The psychic pressure intensified. Elena's nose began to bleed as they forced their way through her mental defenses. Through the bond, she felt Crix's growing concern. Then they found something, a memory Elena herself had forgotten. 2 nights before launch, she'd woken to an alert in her quarters. A maintenance crew working on the Concordia's cargo holds. She'd checked their credentials, found everything in order. But now, seeing it again through the mind-seer's probe, she noticed details she'd missed. The maintenance chief, she gasped. His authorization codes, they were from Valoran security databases. The mind-seer's concentration broke for a moment. Crix stepped forward. Impossible. How would humans have access to our security protocols? Unless, Elena fought through the psychic pressure, someone on your side gave them access. Someone who wanted those weapons found. The lead mind-seer pushed harder, drawing a scream from Elena as he tore through her remaining mental barriers. But he found no deception, no hidden agenda, only the truth of her mission and her determination to prevent war. Enough. Crix's voice cut through the haze of pain. She speaks truth. End the probe before you kill her. The psychic pressure vanished. Elena lay gasping, blood trickling from her nose and ears. Through blurry vision, she saw the mind-seers conferring with the elders who had been observing. The human's mind holds no deception about her mission, the lead mind-seer announced. But we found evidence of infiltration, possibly by our own people. Elder Vsara's scales darkened with anger. Impossible. No Valoran would betray our security protocols to humans. The evidence is clear, Crix argued. Someone wanted this diplomatic mission to fail. Someone with access to both human and Valoran security systems. These accusations are dangerous, my prince, Elder Vsara warned. Remember your position, and your duty to our people. Elena struggled to sit up, her head pounding. Through the bond, she felt Crix's growing suspicion. He recognized something in the elder's tone. The human has passed the second trial, the lead mind-seer declared. But the knowledge we found poses new questions. Questions that some might prefer remain unasked. As medical attendants helped Elena from the chamber, she caught fragments of urgent conversation between the elders. Someone was clearly unhappy with what the mind-seers had discovered. Later, in her quarters, Crix arrived with healing crystals for her psychic trauma. The mind-seer's report has caused quite a stir, he said, carefully applying a crystal to her temple. Several members of the High Council left immediately for an emergency session. They're running scared, Elena winced as the crystal's energy pulsed through her battered mind. We're getting close to something they don't want found. Elder Vsara's reaction was telling, Crix agreed. I've known her since I was a child. She's always been a voice for aggressive action against humans, but this felt different. The maintenance crew's codes, Elena said. They had to come from someone high in Valoran security. Someone who could access the protocols without raising alarms. Crix's crystalline eyes narrowed. Someone like a high elder. Before they could discuss it further, alarms blared throughout the complex. Crix's communicator crackled with urgent messages. What is it? Elena asked, feeling his shock through their bond. The lead mind-seer, Crix's voice was grim. He's dead. Apparently, took his own life after the trial. Elena felt cold. He knew something. Something he found in my memories. And now someone is tying up loose ends. Crix helped her to her feet. We need to move. The third trial is tomorrow, but I doubt our enemies will wait that long. Where can we go? This place is a fortress. Crix's expression hardened. There's one place they won't expect us to hide. The sacred caves beneath the city. No one goes there except for blood-binding ceremonies. Which we technically had, Elena managed a weak smile. Even if it was an accident. Nothing about this was an accident, Crix said quietly. I'm beginning to think even our binding was part of someone's plan. They just didn't expect us to work together instead of killing each other. As they slipped out of her quarters, Elena felt the weight of their situation. They were fugitives now, bound by blood and hunted by their own people. And somewhere in this crystalline city, someone was preparing to start a war that would destroy both their species. The third trial would have to wait. First, they needed to survive the night. The sacred caves beneath the Valoran capital were a maze of crystalline tunnels, their walls etched with the history of countless blood bindings. Elena's neural implant cast a soft blue glow as they moved deeper into the labyrinth, while Crix's natural bioluminescence pulsed with a gentle amber light. These markings, Elena traced her fingers over the crystal walls, they're all blood-binding stories. Every pair that has ever been bound, Crix confirmed, his voice echoing softly. Their trials, their victories, their sacrifices. Some ended in glory, others in tragedy. And which will we be? Elena asked quietly. Before Crix could answer, they heard movement from one of the deeper tunnels. They pressed themselves against the crystal wall, Crix's scales shifting to match the cave's coloring. Elena held her breath as armed guards passed nearby, their energy weapons casting eerie shadows. They're searching the caves, Crix whispered once the patrol passed. Someone knows we're here. We need to find proof of the conspiracy before they find us, Elena said. The Mind Seer found something in my memories, something about those security codes. There has to be a connection. Crix's crystalline eyes narrowed in thought. The sacred archives. Every blood binding is recorded there, along with all official documentation. Including security protocols. You think the evidence might be there? If someone used our security systems to plant those weapons, there would be traces in the archive logs. Records that even a High Elder couldn't completely erase. They moved deeper into the caves, avoiding 2 more patrols. The bond between them had grown stronger in their time together, allowing them to communicate with subtle gestures and shared impressions. Elena felt Crix's rising tension as they approached a massive crystalline door covered in ancient symbols. The archive chamber, he explained, placing his hand on a crystal panel. Only those of royal blood can open it. The door hummed with energy, then slowly parted. Inside, countless crystal shards hung suspended in the air, each containing centuries of Valoran records. Crix moved purposefully through the floating archive, his hands moving in precise patterns as he searched. Here, he called softly. Security protocols from the past month. But, these records have been altered. Elena joined him, her neural implant interfacing with the crystal's data structure. Look at these access patterns. Someone copied our protocols to an external system, then deleted the logs. But they missed something. Her implant projected a holographic display of the data stream. There, she pointed. A quantum signature. Every system leaves one, even when the logs are erased. This matches. The High Council's private network, Crix finished grimly. Used by Elder Vsara and her inner circle. Suddenly, slow clapping echoed through the chamber. They spun to find Elder Vsara herself standing in the doorway, flanked by armed guards. Impressive detective work, the Elder said, her scales gleaming dangerously. Though I'm disappointed, my prince. You were supposed to kill her when we arranged for your paths to cross. The blood binding was an unfortunate complication. Crix's eyes widened. You planned this? The weapons, the diplomatic mission's failure. Of course, Vsara smiled coldly. Humans are a plague, spreading across the galaxy, consuming resources, interfering with proper order. This war is inevitable. We're simply choosing the time and place. By sacrificing peace? Elena demanded. Thousands will die. Millions, Sarah corrected. That's rather the point. Humanity must be contained before they grow too powerful. And you, my dear, will help us achieve that goal. She raised a crystalline staff. Your deaths, human and prince together, will be the spark that ignites this war. Tragic victims of human treachery, discovered and executed in our most sacred place. Energy crackled from the staff. Crix shoved Elena aside as the blast struck, shattering crystal archives behind them. The guards opened fire, forcing them behind pillars of living crystal. The archives, Elena shouted over the weapon fire. If we can transmit the evidence. Already done, Crix growled, his scales shifting to combat patterns. Emergency protocols. Every blood-binding record is automatically shared with all council members. Including what we just found. Sarah's expression turned murderous. Kill them both. Now. The chamber erupted in chaos. Crix's combat training took over as he engaged the guards, his crystalline claws extending into deadly weapons. Elena's neural implant went into combat mode, enhancing her reflexes as she fought alongside him. Through their bond, they moved in perfect synchronization. Where Crix struck high, Elena struck low. When she needed cover, he provided it. When he was flanked, she was already there to help. But they were outnumbered, and Sarah's staff wielded terrible power. A blast caught Elena in the side, sending her sprawling. Crix roared in shared pain through their bond, leaving himself open to a guard's attack that left him bleeding. Enough of this, Sarah snarled, raising her staff for a killing blow. Suddenly, new voices echoed through the chamber. Stand down. By order of the High Council. Council guards poured into the room, led by the remaining elders. Sarah's forces hesitated, caught between loyalty and law. The evidence has been received, one elder announced. Elder of Sarah, you stand accused of conspiracy against both our peoples. Surrender now. Sarah's scales darkened with rage. Fools. You would trust humans. They will destroy us all. She turned her staff on Elena, raw power building for a fatal strike. Crix dove forward, but he wouldn't reach her in time. Elena closed her eyes, feeling Crix's desperation through their bond. Then she felt something else, the living crystal around them, resonating with their shared blood bond. Acting on instinct, she pressed her hand to the crystal floor. The chamber's crystals flared with blinding light. Sarah's blast was absorbed and redirected, the energy racing through the crystal lattice like lightning. When the light faded, the elder lay unconscious, her staff shattered. Elena felt Crix helping her up, supporting her wounded side. Through their bond, she felt his mix of relief, pride, and lingering shock. The sacred crystals, he whispered. They responded to our bond. That's never happened with an outsider before. Perhaps, the lead elder said thoughtfully, she is not as much of an outsider as we believed. As council guards led Sarah and her conspirators away, Elena leaned against Crix, exhausted but alive. They had prevented a war, exposed a conspiracy, and perhaps begun to bridge the gap between their species. But as she felt Crix's steady presence through their bond, she realized they still faced one final challenge: what would happen to them now? The High Council chamber was packed with representatives from both species, Valoran elders in their ceremonial robes and human diplomats in formal attire. 1 week had passed since Sarah's failed conspiracy, and now both civilizations stood at a crossroads. Elena stood before them all, her dress uniform bearing both human insignia and Valoran honor marks. Through their bond, she felt Crix's presence at her side, steady and strong. His royal armor gleamed, the damage to his horn now transformed into an intricate pattern of silver inlay, a mark of pride rather than shame. The evidence is conclusive, the lead elder announced. Elder Sarah and her conspirators sought to trigger war between our peoples. Thanks to Commander Drake and Prince Crix, their plot was exposed. The question now is, where do we go from here? Admiral Chen, who had arrived with the human diplomatic team, stepped forward. The Alliance Council proposes a formal peace treaty. What happened here proves we're stronger together than apart. And what of the blood binding? Another elder asked. No human has ever been bound to one of our own. The implications are profound, Crix finished. He turned to face the assembled council. Our most sacred tradition showed us something we had forgotten, that bonds of trust transcend species. The crystals themselves recognized this truth. Elena felt warmth flow through their bond at his words. In the past week, as they'd worked to stabilize relations between their peoples, their connection had only grown stronger. What had begun as an accident now felt like destiny. A blood binding cannot be broken, the lead elder reminded them. Commander Drake, you understand what this means. You would be bound to our world, to our people, to Prince Crix, until death. Elena met Crix's crystalline gaze. Through their bond, she felt his question, not just about politics or peace, but about them. About everything they'd discovered together. When I came to this world, she addressed the council, I believed in the possibility of peace between our peoples. Now I've seen that possibility firsthand. The bond Crix and I share proves that our differences can become our strengths. She turned to face the human delegation. Admiral, I formally request a permanent diplomatic posting to the Valoran homeworld. Someone needs to ensure this new peace has a foundation to build on. Admiral Chen smiled knowingly. Request granted, Commander. Though I suspect your reasons aren't entirely diplomatic. A ripple of amusement went through the chamber. Even the Valoran elders' scales shifted in patterns of approval. Then it is settled, the lead elder declared. The peace treaty will be signed, with the blood binding between Commander Drake and Prince Crix standing as its living symbol. But first. His expression turned serious, there is the matter of the third trial. Elena's heart skipped. In the chaos of exposing the conspiracy, she'd almost forgotten about the final trial. Crix tensed beside her. The trial of choice, the elder continued. Both bound must choose to accept their bond freely, knowing all it entails. Commander Drake, Prince Crix, stepped forward. They moved to the center of the chamber, facing each other. The living crystals around them began to pulse with soft light, responding to their presence. Your blood binding began in accident, the elder intoned, but it must be completed by choice. Prince Crix, do you choose to accept this bond, knowing it ties you to one not of our kind? Crix's crystalline eyes met Elena's. Through their bond, she felt the depth of his emotion, respect, admiration, and something deeper that had grown between them. I choose to accept, he said firmly. Not because of tradition or duty, but because Elena Drake has shown me that the strongest bonds are those we forge ourselves. And you, Commander Drake? Do you choose to accept this bond, knowing it ties you to a world and culture not your own? Elena smiled, feeling the rightness of the moment. I choose to accept. Because sometimes the best diplomatic solutions aren't found in treaties, but in the connections we make when we open our hearts to new possibilities. The crystals around them flared brilliantly, responding to their choice. Through their bond, Elena felt their connection deepen and strengthen, becoming something unshakable. The third trial is complete, the elder announced. The bond is sealed by choice, not just blood. Let it stand as the first of many bridges between our peoples. The chamber erupted in applause, human and Valoran together. As peace treaty datapads were distributed and formal ceremonies began, Elena felt Crix's hand slip into hers. No turning back now, she whispered, smiling up at him. I wouldn't want to, he replied, his scales shifting in patterns she now recognized as joy. Though I admit, when you first scratched me in that fight, I never imagined it would lead to this. That's the thing about humans, Elena laughed softly. We're full of surprises. Through their bond, shared emotions flowed freely, hope, joy, and the promise of a future neither of them could have imagined before their paths crossed. They had started as reluctant enemies, become allies of necessity, and now stood as something entirely new, proof that the strongest bonds are those we choose to forge, even across the stars themselves. As the formal ceremonies continued around them, Elena and Crix remained together, their bond a living testament to the power of choice, trust, and the unexpected ways that destiny sometimes claims us all.